Very gritty. Sorry about that. An album called I Don't Believe in Miracles. Colin Blunstone, Say You Don't Mind. Welcome back. Looking through the cuttings about Alan Freeman, I came across a banner headline, enormous headline. It said, Alan Freeman at 43. Is there an age limit for DJs? No, certainly not. Incredibly, here he is at 60, the granddaddy of the pop. Fluff came to England 30 years ago, arriving, I think, on April the 1st, 1957, from Australia, where he was born and where he started in radio. He got a job, first of all, with Radio Luxembourg, before being hired by the BBC, and there he stayed for nearly 20 years, which included almost 11 years on Pick of the Pops. And he is still picking the pops, refusing to grow old gracefully. Only now he's a regular on one of the London commercial stations. So there really is only one way to welcome him in. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Jonathan Dunn. As I live and breathe. How are you?
I'm very, very well. It's very nice to see you again.
It's great, yeah. It's actually very nice to be back in the portals of the celebrated BBC.
I know. Did you leave or were you pushed?
No, I actually left. I remember when I thought about it, and when the papers printed the story, I think it was the Daily Mirror, and they said, was he pushed or did he jump? No, I actually jumped, and I'm very glad I did, because it took quite a bit of courage, because there I was. I'd worked for the corporation for 20 years, and I was doing the Saturday afternoon rock show, Radio 1, and fortunately was winning all the awards as the best radio show in the country. And I remember I was going out to Elton John's for lunch, and I was being driven in this wonderful car by a lovely lady named Dolly East, who was Ken East's wife, Ken of EMI. And I was obviously very deep in thought about this, and Dolly was driving like a maniac, as though she was participating in Le Mans. And all of a sudden she snapped her fingers and she said, Fluff, she said, penny for the thoughts. And I said, I think I'm going to leave the BBC. Oh, yeah. She said, where are you going to go? I said, I've got no idea. She said, you're actually going to leave the BBC without anything else lined up? And I said, yeah. She said, you're a very courageous man. She said, good luck. And it was about 3 months later that I actually walked into Derek Chinnery, the then controller of Radio 1, and I actually phoned him, first of all, John, and I said, can I have 5 minutes with you? And he said, yes. So, I went in, and he was sitting behind his desk, and there he was, the mighty controller of Radio 1. He said, what can I do for you? I said, actually, Derek, totally nothing. I said, I'm leaving. And he went quite white, Jonathan. And he said to me, "Oh, yes," he said, "I know what you're up to." He said, "You're going to Capital Radio, aren't you?" I said, "No, I'm going nowhere, actually." I said, "I just decided that after 20 years, it's perhaps time I walked out into the streets and lessened myself of this constant red light that had gone on in a radio studio for 20 years. And I thought, what great fun, because I'll be walking out into the street, and when you have no radio program, you're stateless, aren't you, if you're a disc jockey? And I thought, I wonder if anything will happen. And indeed it mightn't. And I thought, well, if it doesn't, I've had 25 wonderful years anyway, and life is for living. And the truth is that at that stage, and even now, I wouldn't care if I was working for the council, sweeping the streets, so long as I'm happy.
Well, you see, this is the thing. You see, now at 60, you have now turned, Alan Freeman, you know. And
Yes, John,
aren't you getting a bit too old for all this pop?
Why am I getting old?
Isn't it time you knew better, really?
But why do you people, Jonathan, why do you people put people in little boxes? I'm not talking about coffins. In boxes. What has 60 got to do with anything if you're feeling all right? You know, really.
Well,
I know people who are 20, you know, and they are clearly today feeling very old men and women and terribly burned out. And I really feel very sorry for them.
But it is extraordinary, isn't it? Because pop fans really are, in the main, you know, they're mainly teenagers.
Yeah.
And yet they're quite happy. They accept you totally as being the person who should be serving up the music.
That is an extraordinary thing, actually. But, of course, then you must remember that there's a lot of people around who are 40 and 50 who went through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s in pop music, who have incredible memories of it all. And, you see, you can't really say that pop music is just for teenagers. It's not. It's for everybody. I mean, I just heard you playing the chiffons there, you know.
I thought of you when I said sweet-talking guy. But I avoided
Oh, John, you are so... You do butter people up, don't you?
Are you still doing discos and everything?
Yes, I'm doing discos occasionally, yes. Let me say that at 60, I found it necessary to just kind of space myself. I mean, I remember when I was 40, and I used to be doing 5 radio programs a week. I would do 2 discos a night all over the country. I mean, I would do a disco in London, hop into a fast car to get down to Devon by 1 in the morning to do a disco between 1 and 3. Then that would finish, and I'd hop back into the car. I'd drive back to London, so I'd be ready for my program the next morning. Yeah. And it was wonderful, because in those days, one never stopped. You know, you were zoinking all over the country like a total maniac. And I have found that in the last 3 or 4 years, I've got to budget. I've got to have 1 night, or perhaps 2 nights a week, and I've really got to space myself. I remember when I was about 50, and I got out of bed one morning, and for the very first time in my life, I thought, oh my God, I can't move. I thought, hello, it's setting in already.
And you're obviously still as passionately fond of rock music.
Well, the truth is that unless you are passionately fond of it and loving it, and unless it is giving you a lot of exhilaration, you actually have no right in front of a microphone, in front of a public, because if you don't feel this way, there is somebody out there to take your place who feels that way, and so therefore they should be sitting in front of the microphone.
Well, 30 years ago, you arrived in this country. Was it really April the 1st?
It was April the 1st, yes. Yes, I'm sorry about that, John.
Did you intend to stay?
No, because do you want to hear the story? I was working in a timber company, and a local disc jockey there said to me, "Why don't you audition as a radio disc jockey, presenter, announcer, sort of thing?" And I said, "You're taking the mickey." He said, "No." He said, "I'm very serious." He said, "Why don't you audition?" So I auditioned, and I got the job. And then this mate of mine named Graham Bye, who was a very famous radio writer in Australia, he said, "I'm going to nick off to England." He said, "I think, all Australians go over and have a look at the other side." He said, "I'll go over and I'll write to you and tell you what it's all about." He said, "And why don't you come over and have 9 months around the world?" And I said, "I'll tell you what, go over there and see what it's like. And I'll, write to me and tell me, and I will come over. I'll have 9 months off." So he wrote, and he kept writing, and I kept booking my passage on a P&O liner called the Himalaya, I think, in 1957, and I kept cancelling it, see. And I thought to myself, if I cancel again, I will never go. And in the meantime, Graham, in writing these letters, said, you've got to come. You will love England, but don't come to work, because it's the big time. The country is full of amazing talent. You will never get in. So don't arrive here and try to get in and bash your head against a brick wall. And his words were, and go back to Australia hating the Poms because you didn't get in. And so when I actually arrived here, I was kind of feeling almost subliminally zonked in the head that I was on a holiday and I wasn't to think about working. And of course, then I eventually met people, and one of them said, "Oh, I believe that you're a radio man and a disc jockey and all that sort of thing." And I said yes, and so I auditioned. I auditioned for Radio Luxembourg, and it was terribly funny, because when I went to Luxembourg to talk to this guy, I can't think of his name now, this guy who auditioned me, he was terribly English, awfully pompous. And he sat back at his desk and he said, "Oh, Mr. Freeman," he said, "you're a disc jockey, are you?" And I said, "Yes, that's right." He said, "How good?" And I was so incensed, because he was sitting higher than me for a start. I said, "Oh, I'm better than anything you got in this country," swallowing my words and trying to look terribly self-assured. "Oh," he said, if you're so good," he said, "you could audition now, couldn't you?" And I said, "Yes, immediately." And immediately we auditioned. So I went home, never thinking I'd get the job. And he phoned me up and he said, "Hello, Mr. Freeman, it's Thing. I can't think of his name now. Here from Luxembourg." He said, We've been discussing what you did for us this morning, and we think it's barely adequate." And I said, "Oh, yes." And this is a true story, actually. "We think it's barely adequate, and we would like to offer you the 13 weeks summer relief disc jockey stint in Luxembourg. Now, for that, John, pardon me, you would go out to the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg for 13 weeks, where the disc jockeys out of Luxembourg would take their holidays and come back to England or go down to whatever, and you would take over their shows." And he said, "We can offer you £30 a week." And I was sitting by my phone, you see. I was terribly amused by this. So what I did was, there was a little magazine by the phone, and I flipped it over, you see. Oh, he said, "We'd like you to start on the 30th of whatever it is, you see." And I flipped this magazine over. I think it was a copy of Private Eye, actually. And I said, "Oh, I'm awfully sorry, but I'm not free then." "Oh," he said, "You're not." He said, "Fine, no deal." Slammed the phone down on my ear. And I thought, oh, well, we've blown that one. That's fine. So let's go on to the continent and have a holiday. And the phone rang 15 minutes later. He said, "Do you think you could possibly go out there on the 8th of July? I turned Private Eye over again. And I said, "Yes, I'm free." He said, "Good, you have the job." And that's how I started. It was terribly funny.
What did you think of radio in this country compared to what you've been practicing in Australia?
Well, I was a little shocked, because, you know, when you're living in Australia, I mean, everything is so big and so huge when seen from afar. I mean, you know, there was England, the White Cliffs of Dover,
the
Queen, Buckingham Palace. I mean, all this thing was so overwhelming. It was unbelievable. And I thought, and when I got in London, I thought, my God, I said, I've got to hear the BBC. The BBC, bigger than Jesus in my imagination, you know. And I turned on the station. It must have been the Light program, and I'm sure it was David Jacobs. He was on air, and Frank Sinatra was singing. You see. And I thought, oh, they're playing Frank Sinatra, so I listened. And Frank Sinatra track finished. And this voice came in and said, "And that was Frank Sinatra on a gramophone record." I almost fell off my chair. I thought, well, of course it's on a bleeding gramophone record. He hasn't flown in for the day to sing for them, obviously. And so I listened. Oh, I listened very excitedly to the BBC. But I kept hearing of all this bit of, oh, well, that was a terribly nice record, and 3 minutes past 4, and here's another awfully, frightfully good record. And I thought, my God, this is British radio. I thought it's dreadful. It means a bit of a thing out there. Oh, how's your father, you know? And, and so I decided that if ever I got the chance, and particularly to play pop music, you know, we've really got to give this some drive and bang, crash, wallop, because commercial radio back in Australia, by virtue of the fact of being commercial radio, had to be punchy and go ahead, and it was a kind of an offshoot of American radio, and we all know what American radio was even 40 years ago. You know, we had plenty of drive and jingles and carry on, so...
Well, that's what you brought in, and indeed with Pick of the Pops, of course, it was the major thing. Now, look, we've got a bit of a sort of bit of history as a match fair here. The amazing things that you did with the old Sign of the Swinging Symbol,
yes.
Signature Jim Brown say, when you read the entire top 20 over the top of that. Do you remember? Well, every week you did it.
That's right.
Required
twice.
Probably still doing it for all I know.
Yes, I am actually.
Yeah. Well, look,
on that commercial station you mentioned.
Thank you. When you finished doing it as the whole program, the charts come out on a Tuesday, and you used to pop up at the middle of the day.
That's right.
Between, I think it was DLT in the morning,
That's
and then
right.
Johnny Walker took over at 1 o'clock, and you did a sort of little bit in the middle when you were just giving us the latest top.
I did the whole latest top 20.
That's right. And on this occasion, just to show how professional this man actually is, DLT was doing his level best to put you off. Do you remember this?
Oh, yes, yes. Actually, what happened was I turned up at the studio to read this top 20, and I mean, you know, it's pretty solid and pretty hair-raising because it was live, it wasn't recorded. Yeah. And I started reading, and you know, with the music going da 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 da, and up to this number 16, and here it goes. And
you don't need to say anymore. We have it recorded. What we have, I mean, the folks at home heard you perfectly ordinary.
That's right.
What we have here is a recording of the whole
lot. But what
lot.
they didn't hear was Dave Lee Travers plugged in on another microphone, making quite obscene suggestions as I was reading it.
Well, they're not too obscene, because I'm going to let you hear them now.
Oh,
the whole lot together. This is actually what Alan Freeman heard in his headphones. Here we go.
Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, I've got a funny feeling.
Yeah.
That something's about to happen. Greetings, pop pickers. Right, here it is, the brand new BBC Top 30. This week, 3 new ones. New at number 30, Living in Harmony from Cliff Richard. New at this week's number 29, Where is the Love from Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. Down at 28, Circles from the New Seekers. Down at 27 this week, Working on a Building of Love from Chairman of the Board. Down at 26 is Sylvia's Mother, Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show.
Wowee.
Up 2 places, number 25, Lean on Me from Bill Withers. Up to 24 is Journey from Duncan Brown. Out of last week's top 20. Number 23 this week, Rock and Roll Part 2, Gary Glitter. Up 2 places, number 22 is Conquistador from Procol Harum. And up 1 place this week, that's number 21 on the top 30. And that is, Busy Thinking About My Baby from Mardi Gras. Right, here's the top 20. Up 8 places, number 20, Ain't No Sunshine from Michael Jackson.
Really?
Down at 19, I Can See Clearly Now from Johnny Nash. Up 8 places, number 18, Virginia Plain from Roxy Music. Down at 17 is Puppy Love from Donny Osmond. Down at this week's number 16. Breaking Up is Hard to Do from the Partridge Family. Down at 50, 105 Fiat Overture, Electric Light Orchestra. Up 3 places, number 40, I Get the Sweetest Feeling from Jackie Wilson. Down at 13, Run to Me from the Bee Gees. Up 8 places, number 12, Sugar Me from Lindsay DePaul.
I beg your pardon.
2 places. Number 11, that's The Locomotion and
Have a titter.
Little Eva.
Go on.
Right, down at number 10, Seaside Shuffle, Jerry Deckle and the Dinosaurs.
He's
Down
not
at 5
tittering.
places, number 9, Standing in the Road, Blackfoot Sue. Down at 8, Popcorn, Hot Butter. Same number 7, later, Derek and the Dominoes. Up 6 places, number 6, It's 4 in the Morning from Sarah Young. Down at 5, All the Young Dudes from Mott, the Hoople.
Cobblers.
Down at number 4, Silver Machine, Hawkwind. Here's the top 3. Down at number 3, School's Out from Alice Cooper. And would you believe it, Dave, we have a brand new number 2.
Really?
Mama, we're all crazy now from Slade, not kidding.
Correct.
Here it is, the brand new number 1 this week in the top 30. You Wear It Well from Rod Stewart.
Snickers. Big one.
Right. It's Johnny Walker. I tell you what, I don't know how I got through that.
I don't know. I think that's quite astonishing.
But I must tell you even a funnier one.
Just let me repeat to folks who may have tuned in partway through that. That was Alan Freeman, of course, doing the top 20 against the Sign of the Swinging Symbol. What you heard was also what he was hearing in his headphones only from Dave Lee Travis, trying to put him off. Amazing. Sorry, you were saying.
No, John, it was funny because I think it was 3 weeks later that of course, then I was always waiting for something to happen.
You obviously were aware that something might be happening.
I mean, I used to go into the BBC studio terrified. I thought, my God, what are they going to do next? And I started reading this top 30. And I got up to number 4, and Dave Lee Travis crept behind me, and he set the script on fire. And all of a sudden, the whole thing went whoosh, because the flames just traveled up, And I just managed to get the number 1 out before I dropped it and all the ashes. And actually, I think it was Derek Chenery who was head of Radio 1 or controller of 1, and he almost fired us the next day. But it wasn't my fault. Well done, Dave.
Did you ever get your own bag on him?
No, I didn't, actually, because I'm a good, clean-living chap.
There is still time. He is still around as well.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
And doing very well, too.
We did actually ring him and say, would you mind if we played that, him being rotten too? Yeah. Whereabouts in Australia are you from?
I'm from Melbourne.
Melbourne?
Yes, Melbourne, which is in the very south of the state of Victoria.
But you still have lots of relatives and people there?
Yes, I have lots of relatives, and I have a married brother who was actually John, the star of the family. Make no mistake about that. Ted is, I think, 66 now, and he was a petty officer in the 39-45 war. He was a petty officer on the Canberra, which went between 2 Japanese destroyers one night in the dark and got broadsided, and the captain ordered him down to the magazine to flood it, and while he was down there, a Japanese shell hit the magazine, but it was a dud. It was a dud shell. So he survived all that. He then came back home. He then got married to a lovely girl named Joyce, and he said, I'm going to build my own home. And I said, I think you must be mental. I said, what do you know about building houses? And he said, I'll buy a book and find out. And he did. He actually built this house. And after he built the house, he then said to me, he said, I'm going to study accountancy. And he went to night school. And he qualified. I mean, he was an engineer, a petty officer, got married, built his house, and then became a qualified accountant. And the guy just has amazing talent. And when I went back once for a trip, we went into the pub one day and had lunch and got absolutely pie-eyed. And it was then that I had to tell him that he was the star of the family, and I hated him.
Which came first, though, as far as you were concerned? Was it an interest in radio, or was it the music?
Well, it was music predominantly, you see, because like yourself, I'm also very heavily into classical music and grand opera. And the one thing I wanted to do at the very inset as a young lad was be an opera singer. And I actually went along to a teacher and studied for a year. But of course, you see, I wasn't smoking then, but of course I now smoke 70 cigarettes a day, and I have asthma. And of course I had asthma as a baby, you see, so I had a very weak chest. And unfortunately, because of the asthmatic condition, I could never get the voice into the right position. And after I'd been studying for a year, I thought I really must go into a studio and put my voice down on acetate and listen to it and hear what's there. Because I have pretty high standards in all kinds of music. And I want to tell you, I sang something, I can't remember what it was, and I heard it back, and I was devastated. The bottom just dropped out of my world. And I thought, oh my God, you spent a whole year studying to sing, and you sound like this. And I actually rang my teacher that afternoon. I said, I'm not continuing with my vocal studies. And he said, why? I said, because I've just heard my voice. And I said, it's not on, because if I'm going to be an opera singer, I want to be a great opera singer. And ever since, I mean, I realize, and you realize, the tremendously hard work that opera singers put into their careers and learning roles and the whole thing. But I think that in the world of grand opera today, there is a certain amount of vocal mediocrity, this says he, and you're either a Joan Sutherland or a Luciano Pavarotti, or a...
But couldn't you have gone on for fun? I mean, couldn't you have sung just for the pleasure of it in the choir?
No, it wasn't for fun, because my intent was so real. And I really wanted to be a very famous opera singer, but I wanted to be a devastating opera singer. I think that if you aim in any corner of a career and you aren't aiming for some semblance of greatness, apart from having the fun, then I really think you're on the wrong track. That's my opinion.
So when you started in radio, you were aiming for the top then, were you, as well?
Well, I was. You see, it was kind of a consolation prize, wasn't it? it allowed me to stay near music and next to music. And then I thought, well, as I can't be a great singer, perhaps I can be lucky enough to be the person that plays records and helps great artists in music on their way.
But do you get the same satisfaction from rock music that
Yes,
you
I
get
do.
from opera?
Oh, absolutely, yes. you see, the thing is, that these divisions of music are all very different, but they're all great in their own respect, without any doubt. I mean, I can go home and listen to Led Zeppelin and listen to Robert Plant singing like a maniac and Jimmy Page playing guitar like a maniac, and the whole band just giving really totally great rock performances. I can then, put on a bit of Kiri Te Kanawa or a bit of Victoria de los Angeles and hear this greatness, but in a very different field of music.
You get the same pleasure?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Oh, you're preaching to the converted, and I'm entirely...
I know, yes. Because I'm quite sure that a lot of the music you play here on radio, too, you love, and it's great fun, and you enjoy it. And when you're listening to classical music, you get this great thing.
Well, we're getting more of it. We're playing more of it, actually.
And so you should. You see, people should never box themselves up in little boxes, Because I like Elvis Presley doesn't mean to say I don't like Beethoven, and I'm rather passionate about Mahler. And if you have this mind block, then I think you've got a problem. However, you need the years to live in order to broaden the appreciation and get a greater category of music, or greater categories of music in your life. That's how I feel it.
Talking of boxes, just finally, I must ask you about your burgeoning acting career. Now, I haven't actually seen it, but I understand that in Absolute Beginners, you play a very sleazy, very unpleasant television host.
Yes, he was called Call Me Cobber. and he was actually a total parasite on the pop business, and all that he ever did was go on television and be absolutely vicious and nasty. And after Julian Temple gave me the part in the film, I thought, oh, how wonderful, I'm going to do a bit part in the cameo in a film, and it was all wonderful and lovely. And then I was in the middle of filming it, and I thought, my God, this person's ghastly. What a sleazy yock, And I said to Julian one day over lunch, I said, Julian, something's just occurred to me. I said, do you see me as this character that I'm playing? He said, you're doing it very well, Alan. He was non-committal. And I thought to myself, oh, God, I hope this isn't me, because I'm sure it's not.
Well, wasn't there a rumour that, in fact, Colin McInnes, when he wrote Absolute Beginners, wrote that part round the young Alan Freeman?
Well, so I heard. But, John, you know I'm lovely. You know I'm not sleazy.
You had to put an Australian accent on, too.
Oh, yes, it was, and I had to consciously think about this, you see. Hello, yes, call me Cobber, and welcome to the television show, and it was terribly funny, actually, me doing a Paul Hogan.
So is there going to be more? Is your acting career just beginning?
No, I would think that there is no impending Academy Award. I think it was just another moment in my life, and it was just great fun to be on the same film set with David Bowie and all these people. I mean, I've been tremendously lucky, John, right throughout my career.
Alan, it's been great to meet you again anyway. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, John.
A 60-year-old, and he doesn't look it, Alan Freeman.